I was accused of fraud because of a report I didn't write. Overnight, I went from reliable employee to corporate ghost. But when I started digging, I found a name I never expected. If you had asked me that morning, I would have told you it was just another Tuesday. I was at my desk by 8:30, sipping gas station coffee and sorting through the usual flood of emails. The kind of stuff that makes your eyes glaze over: status updates, project trackers, and the occasional company-wide free donuts in the break room blast that disappears in 2 minutes flat. I had been working at Mason and Bell Logistics for nearly 9 years. Not flashy work, but I was steady. I showed up, hit my numbers, helped new hires get their footing. Folks called me dependable, reliable. One guy even joked I was like the office coffee machine. Always there, never broke down. I thought that was a compliment. The first red flag came around 10:15. I got a calendar invite from someone in compliance, a name I barely recognized. The subject line was cold and vague. Urgent review, financial discrepancy. It was set for 10:30. No details, just that. My stomach tightened. I figured it was a mistake. Or maybe something stupid, like a form I forgot to sign. I clicked accept and got up to refill my coffee. By the time I walked into that glass-walled meeting room, something felt off. The room was too quiet, too clean. There were two people already inside, Angela from compliance and a guy I had only seen once or twice in passing. He introduced himself as Greg from HR. No handshake. Angela pushed a manila folder across the table toward me. "We've identified some irregularities in last quarter's freight reports," she said. "Your credentials were used to authorize overpayments." I blinked at her. "What?" She kept her tone flat. "Over $70,000 worth, across multiple shipments." I let out a dry laugh, thinking this had to be a mix-up. But Greg did not laugh. He just opened the folder and started listing off transaction IDs. There was a spreadsheet printout with my employee ID on every line. My name, timestamps, approvals. All of it looked official. The room started spinning a little. I did not sign off on those. I do not even handle freight payments. That is not my department. Angela did not nod. She just looked at Greg, who started writing something down. I felt heat rising in my neck. "There has to be a mistake," I said. "This is not mine. I would never." "We are not accusing you yet," she said, but the way she said it, that was worse than an accusation. Like she already had a verdict in her head. The meeting ended without a resolution. They said they would pause access to my accounts while the review was ongoing. That they appreciated my cooperation. That someone would be in touch. I walked out of that room in a fog. My keycard still worked, but I felt like a ghost. People who normally waved or asked about the game last night avoided eye contact. A guy I trained last year practically ran the other way when I passed him by the copier. Back at my desk, my inbox was locked. I tried calling IT. No answer. Then I emailed my manager, Cheryl. Just a simple note asking if she knew what was going on. No reply. By lunch, it was like I had been scrubbed from the building. But the worst part? Nobody told me to leave. They just let me sit there, in a chair I had warmed for almost a decade, like I was waiting for a sentence I had not even earned. And I knew right then, I was on my own. I stayed at my desk that whole afternoon, staring at my screen like it might flicker back to life if I willed it hard enough. I could still hear the usual background noise, phones ringing, keyboards tapping, someone laughing too loud near the vending machines. It all sounded normal. But to me, it felt like listening through a wall, like I was no longer part of it. I kept refreshing my inbox, even though I knew it was locked. Kept checking my calendar like someone might slip me another cryptic invite with answers this time. Nothing. Around 3, I stood up and walked to Cheryl's office. Her door was half closed. I knocked. She looked up, startled, then immediately glanced back down at her screen. No smile. "No, hey Mike, come in. I just wanted to ask if you've heard anything about." I started. She cut me off. Said she was in the middle of something and could not talk. That was not like Cheryl. She had always been straight with me. Honest. Even blunt when she needed to be. But this? She would not even look at me. I stood there like an idiot for a second before nodding and backing away. Down the hall, I passed Jason from accounting. He had always been the kind of guy who would stop you for small talk, whether you liked it or not. This time, he looked right through me. That was when I realized the news had already spread. Not officially, of course, but people knew. I had become that guy, the one everyone whispered about in the break room, the one no one wanted to be seen talking to. Because guilt is contagious in places like this. By the end of the day, I was still in my chair, hands idle, eyes dry from staring at a screen that would not respond. Nobody came to speak with me. Nobody offered clarification. At 5:30 sharp, most people were packing up. I grabbed my coat and started walking out. In the lobby, security gave me a look, one of those squinty, assessing stares. I half expected them to stop me. They didn't, but they were watching. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with all the lights off except one. I had my work laptop in front of me, powered down. My phone kept buzzing with random company alerts, but nothing from HR, compliance, or Cheryl. I opened up my old files. Backups I had kept for years. Spreadsheets, reports, performance reviews. I combed through them until my eyes hurt. I was not even sure what I was looking for, just some thread I could pull. Everything looked normal. No missing documents. No obvious fraud. Nothing I had touched looked different than any other quarter. Which made it worse. Because if I could not see it, how the hell was I supposed to explain it? At some point, I found myself typing a long email to Angela in compliance. I wanted to ask her for the raw data. I wanted to tell her I was being set up. I wanted to beg her to look again. But I deleted it. It would not matter. Not now. They were not interested in truth. They were interested in containment. And if someone needed to be the fall guy, well, I was already in the spotlight. I shut the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the ceiling. The question kept repeating in my head like a broken loop. Who did this? And more importantly, why? Then I remembered something. Something that made me sit upright. One of the shipments they mentioned in that folder, one of the ones with the overpayment, was routed through a client I had flagged months ago for shady billing. I had emailed a warning about it, had even recommended we freeze their account temporarily. But that report? It had disappeared, and I remembered exactly who I sent it to. The same guy who introduced himself in the compliance meeting with a straight face and never shook my hand. Greg from HR. I stared at the wall, the pieces starting to float closer together. And I knew right then, this was not a mistake. This was something else. Something worse. I barely slept that night. Every time I shut my eyes, that folder from the meeting would float into view. All those numbers pinned to my name. Every line screaming fraud. I would jolt awake with my heart pounding, convinced someone was knocking on the door to drag me away. By morning, I was running on maybe 2 hours of sleep and a full pot of coffee. My hands were jittery, but my mind felt clearer than it had in days. If I was going to fight this, I had to be smart, careful, and fast. The first thing I did was dig out my personal backups, copies of reports, email archives, client notes. I had always kept them out of habit, not paranoia. Now they were all I had. I started with that flagged vendor, Redmark Freight, the one I had warned about. Months ago, I had noticed their invoices were inconsistent. Charges for shipments that were never confirmed, fuel surcharges that doubled overnight, stuff like that. I had emailed Greg about it, with a full write-up attached. Suggested we escalate. His reply? We will look into it. But when I checked my sent folder this time, something strange happened. The thread was gone. I blinked at the screen, then searched again. Still gone. I searched Greg's name across everything I had. Nothing. That email never made it into my backup. Now maybe that was a sync issue. Maybe I had dragged the wrong folder over back when I copied everything. But my gut told me otherwise. Because I remembered that email. I remembered writing it. I even remembered using the phrase high risk in bold, thinking it might get someone's attention. Now, it was like it never existed. I pulled up my internal timesheet records from the same week. We used a clunky app to track hours and tasks. Not perfect, but it kept logs of every job code we punched in. Sure enough, there it was. 3 entries under Client Review, Redmark Freight. 8 hours total. Documented. Logged. Dated. If the email was gone, at least this part proved I had done the work. That was something. I scrolled through old chat logs from our internal messaging system. Stuff I had saved out of boredom more than anything. There it was again. A short message to Cheryl from the same day. Sent Greg that write-up on Redmark. Let me know if you want to discuss before escalation. She had replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Suddenly, that little emoji felt like a lifeline. I screenshotted everything. Backed it up twice. Uploaded it to a private drive I had never used before. Paranoia had officially settled in. Then came the moment I had been avoiding. I checked LinkedIn. Searched for Greg. His profile popped up. His job history looked normal. HR manager, Mason and Bell since 2019. But something caught my eye. He had listed a previous role at a consulting firm, the same firm Redmark had once used for their IT systems. That might be nothing, or it might be everything. I needed more. I needed access to something I no longer had, the internal ledger system, where approvals were logged, where credentials were traced, where digital fingerprints lived. Mine had apparently been all over the fraudulent charges. But if someone copied my ID, if someone cloned my access, they would have needed admin privileges. And only a handful of people had that level of control, including Greg and Angela. My stomach dropped. I sat there in my apartment, lights still off, computer screen burning my eyes, and realized I was not dealing with some random accounting error. Someone inside the company had scrubbed my warnings, used my credentials, buried the truth. And right now, the only thing standing between them and getting away with it completely was me. That was the moment I stopped being scared and started getting angry. I showed up to the office the next morning like nothing had changed. Clean shirt, packed lunch, that same tired smile I always wore during quarterly reviews. I walked through the lobby with my badge in hand, waiting for the turnstile to flash red and lock me out. But it didn't. The light turned green, and I stepped through. That told me one thing: they hadn't made it official yet. No suspension, no termination. Just this weird purgatory where I was still technically employed, but everyone was pretending I had already been erased. Inside, the mood was icy. A few people nodded out of habit before remembering who I was supposed to be now. Suspect. Ghost. Whatever label they were using. I sat down at my desk, powered up my machine, and sure enough, still locked out. My access was gone. But the terminal next to mine, the one no one used since Kevin left, that one was still active. I glanced around. The floor was quiet. Most people were in meetings or fake busy. I slid into the spare chair, opened a browser window, and launched our internal portal. It did not ask for a fingerprint, just credentials. I used Kevin's old login. He was long gone, but his ID was still in the system. Another crack in the company's so-called airtight controls. It worked. I was in. I pulled up the ledger. The first thing I checked was the transaction log from that quarter, the one with the flagged overpayments. Dozens of entries showed my name, my employee ID, approvals made at odd hours. Some as late as 2 in the morning. That was the first clue. I never worked past 6, and definitely never logged in after midnight. The second clue? The IP address. Each transaction had a trace. Not visible by default, but Kevin's login had enough privileges to unhide the metadata. And right there, next to every suspicious transaction, was the same IP. It was not mine. I copied it down. Ran a quick search on our internal asset map. The address belonged to a conference room. 1 floor up, room 4C. A place nobody used without scheduling first. A room that was supposed to log badge swipes for entry. But I remembered something. A few weeks ago, IT had been doing maintenance on that floor. Cheryl had mentioned it in passing, said some of the badge readers were glitchy and kept defaulting to unlocked. If someone wanted to sneak in and use an open machine, clone credentials, and funnel fake payments, that room would have been perfect. I printed the logs, carefully, discreetly, using the quiet printer in the records room. Folded them into my notebook and slid it into my bag. As I left the records room, I caught movement to my left. Angela. She was standing by the stairwell, just far enough to make it seem like a coincidence. But her eyes were locked on me. Not smiling. Not blinking. She knew. I gave her a small nod. Not friendly. Not hostile. Just neutral. Then I walked past her like nothing happened. But my heart was thumping. Because now I had proof someone used my credentials from a room I had never stepped foot in. And the only question left was who had the most to gain from putting me in the crosshairs. Who needed a scapegoat? And why did it feel like they were watching every move I made? That night, I did not go home. I went to a motel on the edge of town, paid in cash, and turned off my phone. Because I had a gut feeling that the moment they realized I was not rolling over, things were going to get worse. Much worse. I barely slept at the motel. Kept the blinds shut, TV off, laptop glowing in the dark like a lifeline. My stomach was knots and cold coffee, but I kept digging. I could not afford to stop. I went back to the metadata. That same IP address from conference room 4C appeared on 38 separate overpayments. All tagged with my name. All submitted in a 2-week window. The thing was, I had not even been in the building for 3 of those days. One of them? I had been out sick. I checked the HR logs to be sure. My absence had been recorded. which meant someone pushed those transactions knowing I could not be there to defend myself. That narrowed the list. I ran a query on admin logins during those time frames, filtered it by proximity to those entries. I was expecting to see maybe Angela or Greg, but one name kept popping up that I had never expected. Cheryl, my manager. The same Cheryl who had avoided eye contact, who had trained me herself 6 years ago, who sent me dad jokes at 6 a.m. on Mondays. The one who had always had my back, until now. I stared at the screen like maybe I had misread it. But her ID was right there. Not on the transaction approvals, but in the system logs. Logged in 5 minutes before. Logged out 1 minute after. She had not touched the overpayments, but she had prepped the system. Like she had opened the door. And someone else had walked through. I started replaying the last month. She had been acting off. Less casual. More careful with her words. She used to pull me into last-minute meetings about vendor complaints, weird invoice patterns. All of that had stopped. And then something clicked. 3 weeks ago, I had asked Cheryl about an old vendor I used to handle. I was trying to resolve a missing invoice, just doing routine cleanup. She had brushed me off, told me not to worry about it, said, that whole batch got reassigned. I thought nothing of it then. But now I remembered the name of the replacement she mentioned. Brandon S. Another name I had not seen in months. So I searched him. And what do you know, Brandon S. had left the company 4 months ago. The vendor account Cheryl said he was managing? Still active. Still logging approvals. Still funneling money. And it was all tied back to me. It hit me like a sledgehammer. Brandon's credentials were being used by someone inside. Someone like Cheryl. Someone like Greg. Suddenly, it all made sense. Brandon had left. His account should have been disabled. But someone kept it alive, kept it moving quietly behind the scenes. They funneled payments through fake vendors and used my ID to sign off, making me the fall guy. It was sloppy, rushed, which meant someone got greedy or scared. I printed every log, every timestamp, every system trace. I had a folder thick enough to snap a cheap binder. And right as I was closing the last spreadsheet, a new email popped into the inbox I had been ghosting through using Kevin's login. It was marked urgent, from Greg, sent to the security team. It read, lock down Mike Barlow's building access immediately. Confirm when complete. I read it 3 times. And then I knew. They were not just trying to bury me. They were about to finish the job. By the time the sun came up, I was already dressed and out the motel door. I had a backpack stuffed with everything that mattered. My backup drive, hard copies of the logs, 2 thumb drives, and a burner phone I picked up the night before. No one was going to believe screenshots. I needed hard evidence. Proof. And now, Greg knew I was looking. I parked 2 blocks from the office and sat in the car watching the entrance. The security guy, Tony, someone I used to chat with over football games, was at his post, same as always. I wondered if he had gotten the email yet. Lock down Mike Barlow's building access. Like I was a criminal. I did not even try the front door. I knew it would be red-lighted by now. But there was a side entrance for delivery vendors, one we had used back during the pandemic when they tried staggered arrivals. Most employees forgot about it. I hadn't. I waited until a courier came through and caught the door before it closed. No one looked twice. I headed straight to the archives room on the lower level, one of the few places without cameras. Just rows of cabinets and the hum of old computers. That was where I plugged in the drive and backed up every piece of data one last time. And that was when I heard footsteps. I froze. The hallway light flickered. Then Cheryl stepped into view. Her face said it all. Tired, brittle, cornered. You should not be here, she said. I did not move. Neither should Brandon's login. She flinched. For a second, she looked like she might play dumb. But then her shoulders sagged, and she shut the door behind her. I expected denial. A lecture. Maybe even tears. What I did not expect was the truth. It was supposed to be one time, she said quietly. The company was bleeding. Bonuses were gone. Layoffs were coming. Greg had this plan. I kept my mouth shut. Let her talk. She told me they used Brandon's dormant account to reroute vendor funds. They built fake shell companies, just P.O. boxes and invoice numbers. Nobody ever checked. Greg handled the logistics. Cheryl approved what needed approving. Angela scrubbed the trails. And me? I asked. You were clean, respected, reliable. If anything got flagged, it would trace to you, not someone already on thin ice. My blood ran cold. So that was it. They picked me because I was easy to pin it on. Because no one would believe I could fight back. But she was not done. They're panicking now, she said. Angela's been shredding documents. Greg wants you gone before you find the vendor list. My heart kicked into overdrive. Because I had found the vendor list. I pulled it from my bag and laid it on the desk between us. Dozens of names. None real. All funneled through accounts tied to one IP address. Conference room 4C. Cheryl stared at the pages like they might catch fire. You do not understand, she whispered. If this goes public, we are all screwed. I stared at her, quiet for a beat. Then I said, good. She looked at me like I had betrayed her. Like she was the victim. I picked up the file, zipped it back into my bag, and brushed past her. But just before I opened the door, she said something I will never forget. They will not let you walk out of here. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. Heart pounding. Palms slick. Bag pressed tight against my side like it carried gold, and in a way, it did. It carried the truth. And people like Greg? They did not let the truth walk out the front door. The plan was simple. Get out, get safe, and dump everything on an outside auditor I had already lined up. I had drafted a full report the night before. I even included a recorded video of myself walking through the findings, naming names, laying it all out. But none of that mattered if I did not make it out. I had barely made it to the second floor when I heard the ding of the elevator doors below. Voices. 2 of them. Fast footsteps followed. I ducked into the nearest office, dark and used. I crouched behind a filing cabinet, holding my breath like a kid playing hide-and-seek. Greg's voice echoed up the stairwell. He is still in the building. Check every floor. He has something. They were not even pretending anymore. Another voice, lower, unfamiliar, replied, he cannot get out the front. We already shut that down. That meant I had maybe one exit left, the rooftop garage. I waited until the voices faded, then slipped out the side door and took the back stairwell. I moved fast, quiet, barely breathing. Every corner I turned felt like a gamble. My hands shook, but I never let go of that bag. On the 5th floor, just before the roof access, I ran into Tony, the security guy. He saw me and froze. I held my hands up. I am not doing anything wrong, I said, voice low but steady. But if I do not get out of this building right now, people are going to make sure I never get a chance to prove it. Tony looked at me for a long second. Then he stepped aside. He did not say a word. That small nod he gave me. That was the first real act of courage I had seen in days. I burst through the rooftop door and sprinted across the garage. My old Honda sat in the corner, coated in dust. I threw open the door, started the engine, and peeled out like my life depended on it. Because it did. In the mirror, I caught one last glimpse of Greg stepping onto the rooftop, his eyes locked onto mine, his phone to his ear, calling someone. I did not wait to find out who. I was already gone. But the fight was not over. Not even close. I did not go home. I drove 3 hours north. No GPS, no highway, just backroads and static-filled radio. I stopped in a nowhere town, paid cash for a room above a bar that smelled like old fries and bleach. The kind of place no one asks questions. For 2 days, I stayed off-grid. I double-checked every file, scrubbed the metadata, ran encryption twice. I forwarded the report to 3 independent auditors, 2 private, 1 government. I sent it all from anonymous accounts I had set up months ago for side projects I never thought I would need for survival. I even mailed a hard copy to a friend from college who owed me a favor and worked for a small investigative news outlet. Just in case. Then I waited. And that was the worst part. Not the running. Not the hiding. The silence. Total blackout from the company. No calls. No threats. Not even a cease and desist. I figured they were scrambling. Trying to get ahead of the leak. Probably spinning some internal narrative already. Disgruntled employee. Misunderstood approvals. Isolated oversight. Standard playbook stuff. But then, on the morning of the 3rd day, my inbox lit up. Not the burner one. My real one. It was from Cheryl. Subject line, I'm sorry. The body of the message was short. You were right. It's all coming down. I've already resigned. Greg is gone. Angela too. They're saying it was an isolated scheme between the 3 of us. They're trying to wash their hands. You saved the company, but they will never admit it. That was all she wrote. No signature. No plea for forgiveness. Just the final nail in the coffin I had been dragging behind me since the day this started. I stared at that screen for a long time. I should have felt something. Relief. Satisfaction. Anger. But all I felt was tired. So tired I could not even move for a full 10 minutes. Eventually, I checked the company's site. There it was. Leadership update on the homepage. A bland paragraph about internal restructuring. Appreciation for the continued trust of our clients. Not a single mention of what really happened. Not a word about me. No apology. No correction. No clearing of my name. Just silence. The same silence they had buried me under from the beginning. But here is the thing they never understood. I did not need them to say it. Because I had every document. Every timestamp. Every trace. And the auditors? They had already started asking questions. People were talking. And once that train starts, it does not stop. It just picks up speed. The official email came 2 weeks later. No subject line. Just a PDF attachment titled, Internal Review Findings. Final. I opened it slowly, like peeling off a bandage. The first page was nothing but legal fluff. Corporate speak and dry acknowledgments. Page 2 held the line I had been waiting for. After a full review, Michael Barlow has been cleared of all wrongdoing. Evidence indicates his credentials were used without authorization by other parties. That was it. My name was cleared. No call. No apology. No reinstatement offer. Just a single, sanitized sentence buried in a sea of neutral wording. I stared at those words for a long time, half expecting them to change. But they didn't. I had won. And yet, I felt nothing like a winner. I had not set foot in that office since the day I ran. My desk? Probably cleaned out by now. My co-workers, if they even remembered me, likely still whispered the wrong version of the story. People always remember the scandal, rarely the correction. I heard through a friend in legal that Greg was facing federal charges. Something about wire fraud, falsifying records, obstruction. Angela lawyered up and vanished. Cheryl resigned quietly. No charges filed, but her career was over. The company was spinning it as a rogue ring. A freak incident. One bad quarter. Swept under a rug big enough to choke a horse. But me? I was still radioactive. No job offers. No callbacks. My name had been rinsed through enough press to make any HR department nervous. They would not say it to my face, but I knew the look. The thank you for applying face that came with a handshake they wiped off as soon as I left. I kept my head down. Took freelance work where I could. Fixed busted accounting systems for mom-and-pop shops. Coded little automation scripts for college kids. Audited spreadsheets for $20 an hour. Humble pie? I lived on it. But I still had something they could never take. Integrity. Even when no one else stood up. Even when they erased my name and locked every door. I stayed standing. And that mattered. I may have walked out with nothing in my pockets. But I walked out clean. I never went back to Mason and Bell. They sent a letter months later offering a settlement. A check with more zeros than I had ever seen on a single line before. For the hardship, they said. To help you move on. I never cashed it. Money was not going to fix what they broke. It was not going to erase the months I spent waking up in a cold sweat, checking my email like a man waiting on a death sentence. And it sure as hell was not going to give me back my reputation. So I let the check sit in a drawer until it expired. What did I do instead? I built something. Small, at first, just a one-man operation helping other people like me. Folks who had been buried by systems too big to fight, told they were crazy, paranoid, mistaken. Turns out there are a lot of us out there. Honest people who got caught in the gears. People who needed someone who believed them. I do not advertise. I do not need to. Word gets around. And every time I sit across from someone who is scared and angry and convinced they are alone, I tell them what no one told me. You are not crazy. You are just up against a machine built to protect itself. Sometimes that is all someone needs to hear to start digging. To start pushing back. I do not need my old job back. I do not need those fake smiles or holiday parties or half-hearted performance reviews. What I have now is quieter, smaller, but it is mine, built on truth. And that first morning, I woke up knowing I was not waiting for an email, not checking my badge, not staring at a locked screen wondering what I did wrong. That was the moment I knew I had already won. They took my job. They took my trust. But they never took my name. I kept that. And they will never get it back.